Good morning, this is Rabbi Shlomo First, Yeshiva Tsama Nafshi, Yerushalyim, HaKodesh, the Beit Knesset of Yeshiva on Rehov Zichron Yaakov number 6, close to the central bus station, so you can walk, drive, take a bus, especially if you're coming from Chutz La'aretz, join us in our shirim. This is the first year in the morning in Avos. Right, we're learning the fourth parak in the first Mishnah. The Mishnah, let's just read the Mishnah just to review. That's you have it on the sheet there, Amram.
No, I'm just looking for something else.
Okay, fine. Very good. Who'd like to read the first? Let's do the first core here on the sheet, just to recap the Mishnah. Yeah, any volunteers? Go ahead, sure.
Yossi ben Yoazer ish tzarta.
Tzareda. Without the Nekudos, it's hard to know, but you get
Ish tzareda v'Yossi ben Yochanan ish Yerushalyim kablu mehem. Yossi ben Yoazer Omer, Ihi beitcha beit vad l'chachamim hayu mitavek ba'afar v'leihem v'hayu Shater Tsama et Divreha.
Okay, very good. Now, if you there was an addition, and just you have the revised copy. Maybe just you have the Shilas and Shuvas Tashbats. It should be. Second page. It's going to give a summary of what we've learned. Here you are. Yeah. Top of the second page. The second page. And we'll give a summary of what we've been discussing. Go ahead.
Read?
Yeah.
Yossi ben Yoazer ish tzareda. Yud helps. Yossi ben Yochanan ish Yerushalyim kablu mehem. How do you enunciate the kaf and vav? How would you?
Kiblu.
The kule.
Oh, the kule. That's the kule. That means that's etc. Usually that's corresponding to etc. The kule.
The kule. Okay. The kule. Grasat. Girsat. Girsat Aleph Zayin.
Ein zeh.
Ha-Rashbats.
So this Girsa of Mehem, we're discussing the Mishnah says Kiblu Mehem from them, Lashon plural, right? So the Tashbats is writing that the Girsa of Mehem is not the Girsa of the Rashbats. If you want to go back to the first page. You have Magen Avos la Rashbats. Could read that, pick that up there. That's the Rashbats, that's really that the Rashbat is referring to. Could read that. Because of the Mishnah.
V'katuv b'Mishnah, kablu mehem, v'hakodem lehem lo haya, ela antigonos.
So that's the question. The question is, it says in the Mishnah, Kibul Mehem, and before them, in the previous Mishnah, this is Mishnah Daled we're discussing now, in Mishnah Gimel, the only one mentioned before them was Antigonus. So the question is, why does it say Kibul Mehem, right, if the only one that in terms of the chain of Masorah, of transmission, was only a singular transmission from Antigonus apparently. So why does the Mishnah say Mehem as in Lashon plural? Oh.
Shehu Romez, is it like a hint, an indication?
It's a hint. It's not direct, but it could be that it's a remez, it's a hint, it's an indication, right?
Ladiganos, the sidato.
The siyato.
Siyato.
I mean, Antigonus and his followers, his colleagues. So that's one way you could understand it, right? That it was really Antigonus was the head of all of them, but it was referring to those that also were in assistance to Antigonus. That's one explanation. Here, Rabbeinu Yonah.
Zichron L'bracha, Daf Hey.
Divrei Hamaskil.
Yosef.
That's a title heading of Yossi, right? Meaning that's referring to the Yossi ben Eliezer.
Perush, or Perush, Antigonus, Shimon HaTzadik.
Rabbeinu Yosef we saw inside ourselves. That was the parish, right? We did that yesterday. That was Rabbeinu. He says that clearly. That it's referring to Antigonus and Shimon HaTzadik. Okay, so that's Rabbeinu
They
Yosef.
lived at the same time, those two.
Oh, so they did that. That we saw. We saw that in the Tiferes Yisrael. If you want to jump go one up, just to recap for you. See the Tiferes Yisrael? Go ahead and read that, Amram. You'll read that just to catch up with us.
Kiblu mehem, igar sina mehem, lo kai, ach, Knesset Agdola.
This was something else. He was explaining that it can't be referring to the Knesset Agdola.
כן, הובלומר,
Havalei
למכלל הדעתיגלוש במשנה גימל, והנראת מלאת מהם קאי השמעון ואנטיגלוס, שמתחילת למילדו משמעון, וכשנפטר ועדיין לא שימשו כל צרכן, שוב למדו מאנטיגלוס. ואפשר עוד, משום דאנטיגלוס היה גדול מהם, והרי המנוהו נשיא לפניהם, והכי לא כלל לב בעדיין. Basically, that there was Shimon, then Shimon died, and Tignos took over,
Right.
and being that he was higher than them, he was the next one. They took it from him.
Right. So really, according to the Tiferes Yisrael, we'll see a little bit more of this as we get further on towards the Yom Tov we discussed yesterday. That really they learned originally from Shimon HaTzadik.
Right.
Well, he was still alive. He was
Right.
the Gadol. Then when Shimon HaTzadik was nifter and they still had what to learn yet, so they
Right.
went to Antigonus, who was the next Gadol. And therefore, the Mishnah didn't want to place Antigonus along with, right, Yossi ben Eliezer and Yossi ben Yochanan, because they were really Talmidim of Antigonus.
Right.
They had to be listed separate.
Right.
Okay, so, but as we see it right now, we have basically there's two drachim, based on the two versions that we have. Whether you have a version that it says mehem, in which it's a plural, and you have to answer why it says mehem, or if it says memenu, right? As we'll see now in the go back to the Shilas of the Tashbats. That's the first source there on the top of the page. Okay. The Girsus you can pick up again. Girsus Ein Zel Rashbats. This Girs of Mehem, the plural transmission, is not according to the version that the Rashbats was explaining. Okay.
Here's that Ein Zeh HaRashbats, he Kablu Mimenu, below Girsa Mehem La'asher Lo Haita Kablatem. Translate.
Yeah. So
the version of the Rashbats is not this. They received it from us.
Menu is from him.
From him.
Right,
Okay.
means singular. So he's like a process of elimination. According to the Rashbats, the Girs is not that it was Kibul Menu from a singular source. Vlogaris, neither a version.
Not a version from them, Mehem.
From a plural transmission.
La'asher Lo Haita Kablatem. Sorry, I'm not sure what La'asher means in this context.
Yeah, La'asher Lo Haisa Kablosum. That this is a difficult word for me to translate as well. La'asher, that it's sort of like that because La'asher, that because Lo Haisa Kablosum elementigis Yisuku Kodum Zaku. That it was because that their reception of the Torah was only from Antigonus, right? Who was the Yisrael, who was before them, who was mentioned before them. Right? So that the Lashon Asher Lo Haisik Blossom, that it was since it wasn't their reception of the traditions of Torah was only from Antigonus, Yisrael, that was previously mentioned to them. Shekodim Zachu, it was mentioned previously. So there has to be, it couldn't be a Girs of Mehem.
Read on.
Yes, please.
The Cain, Yira, me Rashi, זיכרון לברכה, שכך היא גרסתו ממנו, ולא מהם,
Ayin Sham, take a look there, Ayin Sham, the Perusho,
so what is this acronym?
yeah, Ayin Sham, you should look, Ayin, take a look, Sham over there,
Okay.
Perusho in the Perush of Rashi.
I see. Ayin Sham Beperush Zayin Lamed.
Zachron of a
Oh,
brother.
Zayin Lamed, okay.
Yeah, right.
He gets two, because he's
Gets two, yeah. He's giving him a lot of respect to Rashi. Yeah. So Kenyir, it also seems from the explanation from Rashi that was the girsa of Rashi. Rashi had a girsa memenu, right? And it wasn't the girsa of mehem, of a plural. Ayin Sham Beperushos, I'll take a look in Rashi's Zechron Bracha, his Perush, and you'll see that's what, because he says clearly Antigonus. We don't have Rashi on the sheet over here, but we saw it inside. Rashi says clearly that the mehem is referring to Antigonus. So that is a side problem, which we should discuss, because it's like this. Rashi quoted in again. Let's start like this. Divra Hamaskils. Right? Whenever you see many times you're learning in the Gemara, you're learning the Meforshim in the here. You're learning in the Mishnah Brewer. Right? For example, you have the Mishnah Brewer. Open any page, right? And so you have, for example, Nogin Shelo Yisa Isha Bein Pesach Lotzeres Agumbo. The Megan is not to marry women during the time of Pesach to Lotzeres. So it says the Mishnah Brewer, Shelo Yisa Isha. That's called a Divra Hamaskil. That's really what you call a topic heading.
Header.
Yeah, header, right? That's what we call the Divra Hamaskil. You find it in the Rashi's in the Gemara, Tosfos has it in the Gemara. It's throughout all swearing that we use. You have these Divra Hamaskils. Because when you're coming to, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept Divra Hamaskil, right?
Yes.
It's a quote
from the thing.
quoting
Rashi does it all the time.
Yeah, Rashi, and that's classically how our swearing, our scholarly texts in Torah are developed and arranged. That you want to explain something, so you usually bring down, you quote what you want to explain, and then from there, after 2 or 3 words of quote, then you go in and explain what you want to do to have a commentary on whatever is being explained. Now, so if you take a look in Rashi here in the Avos. Yeah, here's the Mishnah. Yosef ben Ezra Yist Schrader, Yosef ben Yochanan, Ishush on Kibul Mehem. So you have here Rashi, Yosef ben Ezra, Yosef ben Yochanan, Kibul Mehem. The Antigonus Kibul as a Torah. From Antigonus they received the Torah. So it's an open contradiction between the Divra Hamaskil and Rashi's explanation. The quote of the Divra Hamaskil is mehem plural, and he's only explaining that they got from a singular source from Antigonus. Right? So that itself is a separate question which I want to develop right now. But here, I just want you to see that.
I saw it.
Yeah. Okay. So in here you have the let me show you also that you have over here. You have the Divra Hamaskil of Rashi. Yeah. So you have Yosef ben Yezer, Yochanan ben Yochanan, right? Mehem.
Yes.
And then that. And meticulous kibul es Torah. So the mehem is plural, but he's only giving a singular explanation, right? So that is a separate discussion as follows. There's a question in general, specifically in the Gemara. Let's say take with Rashi's explanation of the Gemara. Did Rashi write the Divra Hamaskils or not?
No.
Oh, So there are those who say yes. So there's discussion about it. So you said equivocally no. So you probably heard that from one of your previous rabbis or something.
It just came up in the base yesterday.
Go ahead. What happened? Just go on. Tell us what you know about it.
That was the sum and substance of the conversation.
Yeah.
I forgot what the context was, but
Right.
but that was the answer given.
Right. So that's basically standard. First of all, but you have to qualify it. First of all, I don't know personally. I haven't been taught personally whether it's conclusively known whether he did or not. To say that he wrote them all, most likely not. To say that he didn't write any of them, also most likely not either. Right? Now you have to realize that Rashi, when he wrote his commentary, didn't have a printed Gemara, and everything was written in hand at that time. Rashi lived at a time before the printing press. Any documents you had to be handwritten documents. Right? Rashi lived approximately 1,000 years ago. Right? Printing press wasn't until maybe about 500-600 years ago. So Rashi was far in front of and before the invention of the printing press. So Rashi had what we call a kuntras, a treatise, which was a commentary written separate. It was a separate scroll, separate manuscript, written based on the comments he wanted to make on the Gemara. Right? Now, so many times it wouldn't be necessary. Again, you have to realize that ink was not easy to get hold of, right? Quills, parchment was not easy to get a hold of. We live in a world where, Baruch Hashem, we have lots of gashmias, and these things are, a pen, a pencil, these are note papers, these are things you can go buy for 5 shekels, $1 in a dollar store, and in a stationery store. You can pick up a whole notebook and a pen and a pencil to be set for a year's time. Right? These things were very valuable things. Not everyone had access to them, and to get them was very difficult and expensive. Right? So obviously they didn't, and also it takes time. You want to write something, it takes time, and obviously you can understand Rashi was very makpid on Bittul Torah and Bittul Zman. And to waste time is a terrible avera. To waste time that you could be learning Torah, you could be doing good deeds of acts, mitzvahs. It's a terrible avera to waste time intentionally. And if you can avoid it, you're obligated to avoid it. Right? So to say that Rashi would go and write every Divra Maskil doesn't make too much sense either. To say that he didn't write any also doesn't need to make any sense. So maybe what happened most likely is when printing came along, right, and typeset and ink was more available. So they, in order to arrange it when we had, and even the earlier editions before we had our standard text that we have in front of us, the Divra Maskils were added later on. Right, as a help to understand what Rashi is coming to explain. Right, so if Rashi, in his commentary over here, is saying that the Kabbalah that Yossi ben Eliezer and Yossi ben Yochanan received was exclusively, singularly from Antigonus, it's not a contradiction to the fact that the Divra Maskil says Mehem, which is plural, because that most likely was put in by one of the printing processes that took place later on, many years, decades, centuries, most likely, after the time of Rashi. Right? So Rashi wrote his explanation according to his girsa, which, as we see, was a girsa mimenu, singular. They received it from him, from who was him, Antigonus, as Rashi says. Clearly, Rashi says that they received, right, Antigonus kiblu as Torah. They, Rabbi Yossi ben Eliezer and Rabbi Yochanan ben Yochanan, kibble Antigonus the Torah, right? The Divra Maskil says Mehem. That's not a contradiction to the fact that Rashi is explaining singular, because Rashi didn't, certainly in this case, we could say clearly he didn't write the Divra Maskil. Okay? But that's one subject. Okay, fine. Now you have the general subject, you have the two versions. You have the version of Mehem, and you have the version Memenu. Right? So most of our standard Pirkei Avos, you take a look at, has Mehem. Right? So then if you're coming to explain, you have to explain Rashi, right? That he explains only one, and that's what we'll be seeing a little bit further on in the we go further in the Shalos Yeshuvas of the Rashbats. So and then if you don't have that, if you have the Girs of Menu, then it works out very good. That's the most direct and clearly understood version that we can explain, which is the way Rashi is explaining. Rashi could have had both versions on hand. right? There might have been pre-existing versions that were even predating Rashi's time of what the actual version was, whether it was a version of Mimenu, singular, or was a version of Mehem, which is plural.
If he had both versions, though, wouldn't you expect him to have said, what's he said? There's a phrase he
Rashi
says.
is Haki Garsinin.
Yeah.
Rashi you'll see many times in Gemara, particularly Haki Garsinin. This is the Girsa, right? So that, and sometimes, like for example, Tosu will say, no, there's another Girsa. So that's sometimes when Rashi will be taking sides. Sometimes there's a preference for some reason. Could be a halachic preference, a textual preference, but some preference why Rashi wants to reinforce that this is the proper Girsa to use. Sometimes there may not be an issue in terms of what Girsa to use. Sometimes there may be a serious issue as to what Girsa to use. Each situation, each case has to be taken individually. But you're right, when Rashi wants to make a stand on a particular Girsa, say Haki Girsin. Right? It could be that he didn't have the Girsa Mehem, I don't know.
Right.
You know? But other Rishonim did, right? So again, that's somewhat of a historical question. Did they have all the Girsas? Did they not? All we know without some type of a meta commentary, which will explain maybe some of the background of what Girsas they had and why they had these Girsas. We just have the commentaries which are made and what we can infer from them. As we'll see, we'll go further now in the explanation. You'll see how he treats it. Okay, so we're continuing on now with the Tashbats, right? And we're in the middle there, 3 lines down, in the middle of the third line, Lechein, and therefore.
Lechein, Yira'eh, Rashi, no, sorry, Lechein, sorry. The Lechein, Shalo, Lishvash?
Lishavesh. That means to corrupt.
Lechein, Shalo, Lishavesh, et Nusachot, Asher Katuv Behem, Kiblu Mehem, V'Mehem, Dika Amar, that is to say, Hayinu Talmid B'Harav Shekodem Zachram B'Mishneh HaKodemot.
Okay, let's stop here. This is a real important thing to try and grasp over here. Therefore, Shelo L'Sharis Es HaGirsus. Again, we have to. The Tashbats is already explained that we have 2 Girsas, 2 versions in front of us. So therefore, Lechein Shelo L'Sharis Es HaNuschos. So you have to think. I'm not sure. I haven't worked it out clearly. What's the difference between a Girsa and a Nusach? Nuschos. You have 2 different Nuschos and you have 2 different Girsas. Girsas could be texts. The actual text, where a nuscha is like the whole is like including like the style. The whole you don't want to make a corruption in the style, because we're going to be seeing that the Mishnayos, especially in this first parak in Avos, there's a certain style which was adopted in writing over the Kabbalah and the transmission from one Rav to his Talmud. So it could be that you don't want to corrupt the nusach. I mean, there's a certain style which has been adapted, right? And therefore, even though that it might be true that the Girs is Mimenu, and in fact that the true Kabbalah was straight from the singular source of Antigonus to Rabbi Yossi ben Eliezer and to Rabbi Yossi ben Yochanan, right? Nevertheless, they didn't want to corrupt the general nusach. They didn't want to corrupt the general style of the Mishnayos in this first parak in Avos. So they cussed, right? Behem kibul mehem. It could be that's the reason why, even though it could have been a real proper nusach text to use memenu from him, they went out of their way to use a nusach of mehem from them, not to corrupt the general style, the general nusach which is going to be seen throughout this first parak. I think that's what's being said.
Can you make an argument that if Rashi had Mimenu, then he wouldn't have bothered to say Antigonus because it's Pshita?
That's a good point.
Maybe his whole point is in commenting is to say this is why this, even though it says Mayhem,
Right.
it's Antigonus.
Right. So you could say that he had the Girsa Mehem, and therefore he's still, in spite of the fact that the Girsa was Mehem, he wants to say that the actual Kabbalah, right, was directly from Antigonus. Because we're dealing with two different things. There are two dimensions we're really dealing with here. We're dealing with the dimension of the text, right? And then we're also dealing with the dimension of the actual transmission of the Torah, meaning what in fact took place. Meaning what was the transmission that took place. So we have the text, the dimension of the text, what we are reading and learning, and then we have beyond that another dimension of what the import of what the text is supposed to be teaching us, which is basically about the Kabbalah, right? From one Rav to his Talmud, right? So it could be that in fact that the Kabbalah was exclusively from Antigonus to both Yosis, both Yosef ben Yezer and those Yochim and Yochanan, right? Nevertheless, the text was chosen Mehem, and it could be that because as the Rashbats is indicating perhaps to keep the nusach, the style, consistent. Maybe that's what he's saying. Nevertheless, Rashi, when he came to say, he could have had that Girsa Mehem. Nevertheless, he wanted to tell you that's the Girsa. That's what the text is teaching us. But you should know in terms of the Kabbalah was in fact directly and only singularly from Antigonus. Possibly. Possibly. Again, if you look back at the beginning, right, it says here, "V'chein yira mirashi zal shekach hagirsosa mimenu," right? V'lo mehem, ayin sham b'pirusho. So it could be, maybe not. Maybe it's a little bit lavdavka. Maybe that he could have had the girsa mehem, and therefore he went out of his way, because as you said, as Lou was saying, if it was mimenu, right?
It's obvious.
It's obvious. He wouldn't have to say anything. So the reason, if he had mehem, that would be an obvious reason why Rashi would have to come and tell us. Right? Perhaps. Okay. Let's continue. So again, let's just look. L'chein shelo yishavish, not to corrupt as a nuskos, to corrupt the style. Shekosel mehem. They will see throughout the Mishnah. It says behem, meaning these Mishnayos. It says, quote, kiblu mehem, unquote. That's the style that the Mishnayos is going to, we'll be seeing this phrase throughout, right? So therefore, they didn't want to change the style that's been used or was going to be used, that we say mehem, right? There, mehem de ka'omer, and what is that mehem de ka'omer? Whenever we see mehem, that's a code word, right? Hainu talmid v'arav shekoidim. Zochram b'Mishnah Kodemis. That mehem, what's the mehem? Mehem is always a code word to referring to that the Kabbalah was from the Talmud that's been mentioned in this Mishnah. For example, the Talmudim that are mentioned in this Mishnah Daled, it's a code word that they were the ones that received the Kabbalah from the Rav, which was mentioned before them in the previous Mishnah. That's mehem. That's a code word, mehem. It's a code word. It's like a third dimension. It's not just the text. It's not just the actual Kabbalah, but it's also what the indication of the word is supposed to mean. The word is supposed to mean something special in and of itself, not simply mehem from them. Mehem means, in this context of these Mishnayos, mehem means it's referring to a Kabbalah that was received from the Rav that was mentioned in the previous Mishnah. Right? So that could be whether it's a singular transmission or a plural transmission, because mehem, that's the way the style was set to relate to us to these Mishnayos. Let's go a little bit further. I have a few more minutes.
Is that a problem?
Yeah, Mishnah, the Zachram Mishnah Kodesh that was mentioned, right? It's the Kabbalah that was mentioned by this Talmud and the Rav that was previous to them in the Mishnah previous. Shekan.
Shekan Amra HaMishnah Antigonus Ish Sukho Kabal Mishimon Hatzadik V'Amar
Masnisin didan. It's mentioned in our Mishnah. Masnisin. That's he's cutting off the word there, abbreviating the word masnisin. That should be a nun sofit. They dropped the nun sofit for some reason there.
Okay.
Should masnisin didan ours.
Didan Yossi ben Yoezer Yossi ben Yochanan kiblu mehem dehayinu b'shimon hasadik v'antigonos ish sukkot.
So if you want to learn simply that mehem is a plural transmission, right? So then you can say that the mehem is not just referring to the previous Mishnah, directly previous Mishnah, but it could be any of the Mishnayos coming previously. As we see that Yosef ben Eliezer, Yochanan ben Yochanan, were makabel from them. From who is that? From Shimon HaTzadik, who was the second Mishnah in the parak, and from Antigonus, which was the third Mishnah in the parak. Okay.
Vayera מזה שתחילת קבלתם הייתה משמעון הצדיק וסוף קבלתם מאנטיגונוס איש סוכות.
So this is like the Tiferes Yisrael and the Tosas Yom Tov said. It could be, right? How can you explain it in a general, a very basic, simplistic understanding of the simplicity of the word man, from them basically plural? That is the Tosas Yom Tov and the Tiferes Yisrael explained that they received it basically first from Shimon HaTzadik, and in the end they received it from Antigonus.
ואולי אנטיגונוס עליו השלום.
Yeah, that's right. Very good.
היה
Reish Divra.
Reish Divra, the head of something.
He was the Reish Divra. He was like the spokesman. Reish Divra literally means Reish means first or head. Divra, spokesman. He was the head spokesman, the Shimon HaTzadik. I mean, Antigonus could have been the one who was responsible for communicating the Torah of Shimon HaTzadik to the rest of the Talmidim.
ואולי אנטיגונוס עליו השלום היה ריש דיברה לשמעון הצדיק, וקבלת התלמידים הייתה יוצאת ומסתימה מטרבהו.
So it says like this. So therefore, it could be that the Kabbalas HaTalmidim Haisa Yotzes, meaning it was that the Talmidim had received even what Shimon HaTzadik taught through Antigonus, and it was eventually that it was from both of them. So it's true that it was from both of them.
וראה לזה אמרו אנטיגונוס איש סוכו קיבל משמעון הצדיק ולא כאמר קבל ממנו.
Meaning the choice of words in the third Mishnah was Antigonus Isuku Kibol Mishimon HaTzadik. It didn't say that Antigonus was Kibol Mimenu, right? It didn't say that. It avoided that expression Mimenu. It wanted to say directly that Antigonus Isuku was Kabo Mishimon HaTzadik. It didn't say Kibol Mimenu. It wanted to avoid that expression.
כמו שאמר בהני תנא אחרינה קיבלו מהם.
Meaning that's in contrast. Meaning, if you want, there could have been a consistency. It couldn't be accurate. It couldn't be truly consistent because if Antigonus received directly, singularly from Shimon HaTzadik, right? It couldn't say mehem. It would have to say mimenu, but it didn't want to say mimenu because it was going to now have to say mehem in the following Mishnayos. Okay.
The Shinna.
Shma Mina. Learn from this.
Shma Mina. The Antigonus היה תלמיד חבר וריש דיברה לשמעון הצדיק. ולכן אמר במסנין
Didan. L'chein Amar b'Masnisin Didan. Therefore, it says in our Mishnah, in our fourth Mishnah, in reference to Rabbi Yossi ben Yezer and Rabbi Yossi ben Yochanan.
Didan is fourth?
Yeah, ours, meaning ours.
Kibru mehem kafi girsan tas svarim.
So therefore, you have this explanation that if in fact Antigonus was a Talmud Chaver, a colleague of Shimon Tzaddik, and also he was his spokesman for Shimon Tzaddik, then it's very proper to say in our Mishnah that Yossi ben Eliezer and Yossi ben Yochanan, they received it from him, meaning Antigonus, Yisrael, and from Shimon Tzaddik. Right, so you have basically three different ways, at least, of explaining the difficulties involved if it was Mehem. Okay. Tomorrow we should look.
3 ways.
Okay. So one way is that the Mehem was they originally learned from Shimon Tzaddik directly, just like the Tosas Yontif from the Tveres Yisrael, and then after he was Nifter. Shimon Tzaddik, they went to learn from Antigonus. Right. The second one is that Antigonus and his Messiah and those colleagues around Antigonus, they both Yosefs learned from. And then you could say that, as we just learned now, finally, that the Kabbalah Mehem was from both Shimon Tzaddik and Antigonus, because Antigonus was in fact the spokesman for Shimon Tzaddik, and he was also a chaver of Shimon Tzaddik, so they're more or less equal in their giving over and transmitting the Torah to Yossi ben Eliezer and Yossi ben Yochanan.
Can we say there's a fourth possibility, which is that Mehem is just stylistic, and actually it was Mimenu?
No, so that was another explanation, right? That was that they didn't want to change. In fact, it was, and because Mehem is stylistic, because it simply indicates the Rav that was mentioned in the previous Mishnah that they were receiving. That's the style that was chosen for the Mishnah. That's also okay. Very good. We'll take a short break and we'll continue with the Shir Mishnah.